Uh, Good afternoon, and welcome to the broadcast on Construction Marketing Ideas blog for why associations can be of value to your business and the importance of association membership. I had originally set this up as a Google Hangout, which I'd hoped to have some guests on, and several people indicated they would be attending. However, at the moment, it looks like I'm talking to myself, but I'm also recording this um, uh, for Google YouTube for future use. There's me. I'm Mark Buckshawn, and I'm in the hotel in Kitchener, Ontario, as part of the attending a national conference of the Construction Specifications Canada Association. I am the chair of the Ottawa chapter of this association, and with that get the perks of the chapter paying for my travel to this conference. It's a 4-day conference. It's an annual thing. They located at different cities in Canada each year. Kitchener is a medium-sized community, part of a group of communities including Waterloo and Cambridge. It's about 40 minutes west of Toronto, and from my home in Ottawa it's about 5 hours, so it's a driving trip. The conference is at different locations each year, and last year, for example, was in Calgary, Alberta. For those who are not terribly familiar with Construction Specifications Canada, in the US, the closest counterpart would be the Construction Specifications Institute, or CSI. Essentially, it's the Association of Specification Writers, and many of them are spec writers, work in architecture and engineering offices as technicians. Some, of course, are professionals themselves with specification writing training. Specification writing is the contract documentation process in the construction industry. So it's very early in the process, at this early conception of a project. Without specifications, of course, the project can't proceed. And specification writers, by their nature, are influential in decisions about building materials, technologies, which manufactured products and stuff to be used, because obviously, if it's not specified, it can't be used in the certainly in a fixed bid project. And obviously, trades cannot actually make decisions on what materials to use outside the scope of the specifications. So that means with the characteristic of spec writers, a lot of people want to influence the spec writers. So there's design technical representatives from manufacturers and technological service providers promoting their services to the spec writers, and to seek that their product or service be included in the specs, and of course to prevent them being displaced by another product or service. For about 30 years or 25 years, I've been publishing regional construction publications and websites, initially primarily in the newsprint form, and we still do a lot of that. And the business started in Ottawa, Canada, where I grew, where I moved back in 1982 after growing up in Vancouver, BC, and spending some time in Africa. And after about 5 or 6 years in the government, I chose to start my own business as a publisher, initially serving real estate agents and brokers. But in 1989, I came up with the inspired idea of starting a regional construction newspaper called Ottawa Construction News. And I had found a market. There's obviously a niche for regionalized construction information. There's a large community. If you take a city of a population of 1 million or so, you'll have several, maybe 30 or 40,000 people involved in some aspect in the construction industry or the architecture, engineering, and design industry. And even if you boil that down to a smaller group of influencers and decision makers, it's still enough to support a monthly publication. Back in 1990, about a year after starting my publication, I got an insertion order from Construction Specifications Canada's Ottawa chapter. They at that time were running an annual tabletop type trade show, and they wanted to promote the show, and they decided that advertising in a regional construction publication would be worthy. I didn't know who they were. Of course, I started my business not knowing much about anything, but I decided I look into this group, and I decided to volunteer on the show committee, and later, of course, got more involved over the years in a variety of activities with the association, never expecting to have any more role other than to contribute to the association. And I'll come to why that's important in a minute in my presentation. After about 17 years or 18 years on the volunteering with the group, I was invited to sit on the executive, and I don't think the local executive, I don't think this was a great honor. I think they just were short of bodies who were able to help out and participate in the group. About 3 years ago, I found that I was the vice chair, and then 2 years ago, and then I learned that that was an automatic pass to be the chair of the chapter of this trade association. Last year, I became the chair, and it's a 2-year term, so I'm now approaching my second term. And there's a few perks that come with this status, including the chapter pays for my attendance at conferences such as this. For me, that's not a minor thing, because when you're self-employed, travel and entertainment are generally your responsibility. No one else is going to pay your bills for you. But the main thing about this is what it has done for my business. And here's the interesting thing. As I mentioned, I had no aspirations to any leadership responsibilities in this association, nor did I really go at it looking at it from the point of view of the association itself creating business for me. But as I've gone through the years, I've realized how powerful association memberships and involvement are in creating business if you go at it with the right attitude. Now, I've seen over the years people come and go with associations. They sometimes expect instant results and reward for their efforts. They sometimes are puzzled by the fact that they don't seem to work very well. And I've heard stories of from involved associations. There's a bit of a turnover problem. The people join the association, they last a couple of years, and then they leave. And it's usually because their expectations were unrealistic when they went into it, and they didn't understand the process that you've got to follow. In this conversation, I'm going to spend a little time explaining and giving some insights into some of the concepts of association involvement. I think someone has joined the group. Unfortunately, I can't see easily who's here, so if you are joining and you want to send an email or communicate with me, feel free. I'd like to get a little more interaction in this thing if possible. Okay, so what is it about associations? Why are they so important? Well, let's start with the reason why I set up this video, and it relates to a survey I conducted on Constant Contact about the last month. And what I did is I asked people in the survey to give me an observation about what activities they do or things that are important to them outside of repeat and referral business and word-of-mouth recommendations to develop their business. And I selected a variety of categories to give people a choice with the option for another category. And as you can see, it's really, if you look at the chart on the screen share, you'll notice that there is quite a diversity of responses, none of which are overwhelming or majority successful. Now, the rules for this survey were very simple. What I said is pick anything that you were profitable for your business in the last year. People completing the survey, about 100 people did, could either pick one or more. And as you can see, the strongest response is amongst trade, community association participation and relationships, of which 35 people, or 36% of the people completing the survey, said gave them some value for their business in the last year. The next category, social media, and then you go down to things like direct mail and lead services and paid conventional advertising, etc. However, at least slightly more than a third of the people surveyed who responded to this survey made clear that association involvement and participation is a profitable tool for them. Now, since it's not a majority, but it is still the largest group, I'd like to explore with the people who in this hangout some of the reasons why this is the case, and maybe give some clues as to how we can apply these concepts and enhance the results we get. Now, this is not entirely scientific research that leads me to these observations. The research I've done is more like for personal experience. I am trying to dig a little deeper into this, though, and we'll be writing a story for SMPS Marketer magazine in the fall of this year on the topic of association involvement and participation. And it might be ironic, but it's also perhaps significant, that example of writing for the magazine of an association. Because the one thing I've discovered in association involvement is that you can do things with associations that extend and enhance your own natural abilities and talents. And in fact, that is probably the best way to work with an association and get involved. See, the problem with associations is if you join them expecting quick association, you'll get the reaction, I think, from many people, I think I'd like to run for the hills. Now, there's never any problem in asking for business. But when you do association work properly, you have to build the respect and trust and relationships, I think, first, most effectively, before you worry about how much business you get out of it. And to doing that, you have to contribute to the association without worrying about return. Now, when you get to that type of dynamic, you have to decide, well, if I contribute without worrying about return, how do I ship advertising in association journals, fees for membership events, and so on? That can run up a fair bit of cash, and frankly, I don't think gets that much results for the money compared to other things you can do. Or you can volunteer and contribute to the association. And the key to volunteering, I think, as I mentioned, is to do what you like doing, to do the things that give you the greatest level of satisfaction. If you do what you love doing and you do it naturally, you'll have more fun doing it, and it'll be more rewarding for you. So in my case, my natural contribution is always to do with the writing skills, because that's what I'm good at. I'm not the most social person. I'm a bit of a wallflower when it comes to group activities. I can function in networking events, but I really prefer to, and I'm not that sporty, but I do write well. So my reaction, my default position when I join an association is to see if they have a newsletter or a website or some form that you can communicate in a written form, and I offer to my services. And for me, this is a very natural thing because it allows me then to interview people and talk to the people in the role of a journalist writer, get stories, and make connections. And SMPS is a good example of where this stuff works and how it works for me. Now, my example won't apply to you, and I'm hoping for some feedback from others, but it looks like it's me talking toward the video camera here. But for example, you could, when I do writing and I have connections with the association, I get the credibility of being a writer. I also get contacts in the association, and I get the satisfaction of participating. And SMPS is a misnamed association. It's called the Society for Marketing Professional Services, but really it evolved out of the 1970s era where architects and engineers previously banned from overt marketing and activities could start marketing. And so an association was formed initially as a spin-off of the American Institute of Architects, as I understand it, to focus on the marketing disciplines with architecture and engineering professions. It didn't take too long before some people in the general contracting and construction industry joined the group because obviously they're in the same boat. And the concept of here is that it's basically an association for marketers in the construction world. Well, as a publisher serving the construction, architecture, engineering, construction community, dealing with marketers, belonging to a national association of these would be something that would be valuable for me to have as a relationship. So I got involved. I volunteered. There wasn't a local chapter at the time in my area in Canada. Started writing for the newsletter, became connected, and almost instantly had access to the most senior leadership of the association. This has led to opportunities. Even now, I'm invited to the national conferences, which is held in different U.S. cities every year, as a judge for their awards competition, as a media pass. And it's a useful thing to do. Now, here's an interesting observation, though. In the case of SMPS, if you ask how much business have I gotten from SMPS, I'd have trouble quantifying it. I do it because I care, because I think it's relevant to me. And I guess SMPS is the closest thing to an association that matches the actual frame of reference of my business, as opposed to something that would be called a client-focused association. I don't. What I generally look for in involvement, and this is some association of my peers in industry, but the association of the peers of the people who would be the potential clients for my services. For example, spec writers. That is clearly a market group which is relevant to the people who would be potential advertising clients or feature clients in the architecture, engineering, and construction field. So they are people who would buy advertising in my publications and market to them. So it's a logical group of people for me to belong and to be a member of the association. Other associations we belong to are mixed construction associations, different regions. And in some cases, because of our particular trait of our business, we don't actually have to join the association to be considered honorary members in this sort. So for example, general contractors groups, both in Canada and the U.S., subtrades groups. We try our hardest to work with every association we can, and I'll get into the issue of capacity in a minute, because that's an issue in terms of making the most of association participation. So when I go to these associations and get involved in them, my expectations are modest. My business development expectations are limited. And then, interestingly enough, the business starts to happen. Now, my first experience of this happened very early in my business. When I was 1991, I had my local construction newspaper. I joined a couple of local construction associations, one for the commercial non-residential side and one for the residential side, the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. The non-residential one has never really drawn much direct business, although it certainly helps our credibility. But the residential one, they actually have an overt model in that group, the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association: be a member, do business with a member. Now, there was a major recession on at the time, shortly after I started my business, and everything was getting dodgy and very tight. There's not much money. I was concerned about whether I should continue to be a member of the association. And I decided at that time that it was important for me to keep on the membership. That turned to be a very wise decision, because a few weeks after that decision, and unrelated to my decision, I didn't tell anyone about my plans, I got a call out of the blue from one of the committee members on the association's board of directors. And he said, "We would like you to publish our internal newsletter, and we'll give you a contract to do it." And I said, "Well, is there any competition for this?" And he said, "No." So we ended up with a contract to publish a monthly, which circulates to the members. It originally had a complex structure. Now it's a very simple. We produce the publication, and they pay the postage to distribute it. And it's an amazing opportunity for us to connect and be a part of the community. And of course, it generates some revenue for our business directly. But the thing that the real value of association public memberships, for example, the GOHBA and the Home Builders Association, and the associations that my sales reps belong in different cities, is not so much the direct stuff from the association as it is the indirect stuff that comes from the relationships that are built through the association relationships. And the reason why these work so well is the basics of trust and relationship. Branding. If you're seen as someone who contributes to your community, actively supports the relevant associations, and supports them in their good deeds, then people tend to be responsive to you in terms of doing business with you. And also, you know, because you work with them over time, when the appropriate time is to ask for the opportunity of business. As an example, on the Construction Specifications Canada Board of Directors, there's a very successful engineering practice which does a lot of engineering work on heritage buildings in Ottawa and elsewhere in Canada. And they quite openly in their materials said they're celebrating their 30th anniversary. Well, we can do great features on those things with a lot of supplier support advertising, and sometimes we just call up and ask. But in this case, I have room in his office for the association meeting, and I figured it was a great time to ask the question. It took him all of maybe 5 seconds to say yes. And we ended up with a feature that generated maybe $10,000 to $15,000 of revenue. Most by the times over the years that this sort of thing has happened, where businesses almost dropped in our laps because we are trusted by the people involved. They know we're part of the community. We know we're supporting the community. And also you have a personal relationship with them, and the relevance of what you're doing is there. So that's the type of stuff that you get from associations. Now, every business is different and your story will be different, but generally speaking, you can look at what associations your customers would belong to as participant members, and then determine whether you want to join those associations as a supplier support member, which is the category for marketing purposes. It's generally the most effective category. Let me take it through the process, for example, giving you some examples of how you might decide that. And one of the best ideas, I think, is look at your best customers, the ones you enjoy being with the most, and ask which associations they belong to if you don't already know. And let's see if they can invite you as a guest to one of the association meetings or activities or chapter things in your city, and see if you feel that you would like to be a part of the group. You're on an edge here because you already got your customers supporting you and essentially nominating you into the association. And in the process, then, you're going to meet the peers and associates and other people, including your customers, in a non-direct selling relationship to build and cement your relationships and expand the scope. You can extend this to community activities too, voluntary, nonprofit things beyond industry. Why those things work so well, of course, is because, again, your brand, your reputation as a community activist supporter is very strongly reflected. Good example of the dynamics and all this stuff. The company that nominated me into the Greater Ottawa Home Builders newsletter is a brick supply company, a masonry supply company in Ottawa, and the leader of that business is very connected in this concept of social community involvement, association participation. He himself, he's executive, he's been chair of lots of associations, he's well known in the industry, well respected, and he owns or has a large, virtually the lock on the what I call the commercial non-consumer residential market for masonry and brick suppliers. It applies in the Ottawa area. And he, along with some clients, decided that they would like to do a support bicycle ride for the Ottawa Hospital called Ride the Rideau, and turn this into a multi-million-dollar fundraising function. Now, no one in these activities is going out there with their business cards trying to sell their services. But when you involve yourself in this type of community activity, when you contribute and support to it, you build that trust and build the relationships, and then you get the results you're looking for. So this is the story I'm sharing with you. I thought I'd be having a few questions, but it looks like, again, I'm talking mostly to myself. But if you watch this video and you want to ask some more questions, or you have some examples you want to share about community association involvement, please feel free to do so. Here's a summary of the basic points that I'd like to make here as we come to the conclusion of this 30-minute session. Firstly, look at your associations from the point of view of where you can give time more than money. So be thoughtful about this, because association involvement does take a fair bit of time to do it properly. You can be somewhat efficient on it, you can be resourceful, but you're still going to need to be committed. I don't think as an individual you can really give more than enough time to be effective to more than 2 or 3 associations, and 3 is getting up there. I have trouble with 2, frankly. However, if you've got more than one person in your organization, you've got salespeople, you could encourage them to be involved in relevant associations. Take the responsibility and get involved. Number 2, when you participate in this association, recognize it's a long-term play and it is not for a quick grab. So when you budget for association dues and time, do not expect a return on it for at least 3 years. And then you will start possibly seeing benefits. In fact, you need to be consciously non-assertive about your expectations of how much return you can get on your money from association involvement. When you do that, you give the association enough time to make it relevant. Now, sometimes you can tell very quickly, you can sense that there's just no value in belonging. For example, I joined to some Chamber of Commerce events and went to these social networking events, and I saw all these junior salespeople all trying to find one customer to sell to. It was almost embarrassing to see because they were just working so hard to sell rather than to actually build a relationship. And I felt that after a few sessions of this was not the type of group that I wanted to get involved in. However, I know that some businesses who are dealing in the wider business community will work at it, eventually get on the directorships and the board of directors, and probably get some value from that association. So you have to make those decisions as you go along. And that's an interesting observation too about money, because I've somewhat found in some cases that associations with relatively high dues can be more valuable than ones that are inexpensive if they are of wide scope. Having said that, for example, the construction specifications in Canada, the dues are very modest. They're just a couple $100s a year, and certainly it's worth joining if you are looking for business development upstream in the construction business. The second rule is to get involved in the association beyond attending meetings and events. Look for ways you can contribute, and the best way you can contribute, I think, is to do things that are beneficial to the association that you love doing. Now, if you say I'll do anything, you might get stuck on a phone bank trying to call people and drum up memberships, and hey, if you're good at that and you love doing that type of work, you've got a gold mine, because everyone needs you for that. But usually you're better off to pick an activity or interest that is directly relevant to your frame of mind and your focus, your values. Spend time on the things you love doing, and then you'll get the rewards from them. If you do things just because of the money, or should I say just because you think that they're what the association wants you to do, I don't think you'll get the satisfaction. Now, everyone has their own interests and things that make you interested, that give you satisfaction. Maybe you're into sports, maybe you're into community involvement, maybe you're into writing like I am. Pick your thing. And let's be realistic, even if your activity is not formalized in the association program, the association creates an environment where you can test yourself out and try and suggest things. There's really no such failure when you're doing volunteer work. You're not going to get fired for it. Just make your proposal and do your best what you can. The third thing is enjoy the process, be patient, and then let's see what happens. Enjoy the results when it does occur. Quantifying association benefit value can take time, and it's a challenging metric, but as you go along, you will start seeing the leads in the business and the repeat business that starts arising from your relationships within the association. You also have your nose to the ground on what the trends are, the issues, and the most important things. So in my opinion, association membership is truly a valid activity. I'm almost finished the session. It's now 2:27. And I want to thank anyone who watches this show, but I just want to go back to the basics of why this is so important. You're going to need, if you're needing to look for an alternative to word of mouth and referral business that comes in passively, do not ignore the possibility that comes from a community association. If more than almost 36% of other businesses have reported that they've gotten valuable business from this activity in the last year, and you haven't considered the advantage of association involvement, you probably will want to do that. It's probably one of the simplest things you can do to make progress and get a valuable result for your time and money. Well, this concludes the special session on association involvement and broadcast. I'm going to save it to YouTube, so it will be saved, and I will post it online. And if any of you were trying on the 23rd of May, I'm sorry, I thought I set up the instructions correctly, and everything seems to be transmitting correctly at this end. I have to learn why people get the notifications, cannot seem to access the event, because several people indicated an interest in attending, but I don't see them at the same. Of course, they may have just not shown up. Anyways, for anyone who wants to learn more, you can look at the Construction Marketing Ideas blog at constructionmarketingideas.com, or you could email me at bucksean@cnrgp.com, or you can phone me. You'll find the number on the website. Thank you all for watching this program, and I welcome your comments and feedback, and have a great day and weekend ahead. Good evening.